Bismillah. Welcome back, Zoo Crew. So today we're going to be diving into a little bit of philosophy. We're going to be talking about the allegory of the cave by Plato. This is from his book, The Republic. And I guess before we go into this, there's a few things I want to mention first, right? So, as I've said in previous videos, like a lot of these themes kind of reoccur in my life. And sure enough, like I think it was 2022, maybe 2021, I had posted to my story about Plato's allegory of the cave, right? So that's the first thing. The second thing is I want to kind of explain the benefits of philosophy, right? So most people, let's say somebody wants to like go for a drive. The first thing is they have to learn how to drive, they have to get a license and then they can go and drive, right? So this is the same thing with life. People have not learned how to think, right? And philosophy is really like critical thinking. So grade 11 high school, I took a IB class, philosophy, first philosophy class I ever took, and I absolutely loved it. I wasn't in the IB program, right? So I had no business being in that class, but I was intrigued, so I was like, let me see what this is about, you know? And honestly, that was a great class. And I guess one of like the key things like that kind of clicked for me in terms of like learning how to be aware and like think critically was the teacher had us watch this movie. It's a Jim Carrey movie. It's called The Truman Show. So if you haven't seen that movie, you should go watch it. And before we started the movie, she had told, like, she framed everybody as like, okay, you're gonna watch this movie, but you're gonna watch it through the lens of, is this real life? Like, could this be happening to you in your real life without you ever knowing? And like the crazy part about this movie is, so like Carrey's character is like a character in a TV show, and he's unaware of this. Every single person he interacts with is an actor, and his whole life is a movie set, right? Well, a TV set, I guess you could say, right? And slowly he starts to like become aware of these things and then eventually like break out of the set and like claim his own life, you know? So great movie. I think everybody should watch that, especially like through this lens. And outside of that, I think everyone else should go and like take at least one philosophy class in their life, or like go and study philosophy online, like through YouTube, Google, whatever, you know? And then I guess the second point I want to make is, so the first time I was in university, I was doing like poli sci and economics, right? I transferred from Carleton to Auto U, and I dropped out third year, and then I went back to school, right? So I guess it was like maybe 4 or 5 years later, my parents said, "Oh, you have to go back to university. Nobody's gonna marry you. You don't have a degree. Blah blah blah." So when I contacted the university, they're like, "Okay, well, all your credits expired, so you're literally back in first year." So then I was like, "Okay, well, what the hell do I want to study then? Like, if I'm gonna go back to school, I might as well study something that I want to study, you know?" So I took philosophy and ancient history. Mind you, I dropped out before like the first semester even ended. But the point being, like, philosophy has always been something I've enjoyed learning about and like implementing in my life. And there's a lot of benefits to it, you know? So, yeah, I mean, let's get into now, I guess, Plato's allegory of the cave. So, essentially, there's a cave. Inside this cave, there's three different prisoners and they're chained, right? So, they're chained from their neck and their feet so they can't move. And there's a fire behind them. So now they can only look at the wall in front of them. And when somebody walks by the fire or like an animal walks by or anything, they see the shadows on the wall and they see like the shadows dancing, etc. And they start to give them names and whatnot, right? Now, one of the prisoners is freed. So, and he's taken outside of the cave. And mind you, like these people have been captive prisoners for their whole life, right? So they've never seen the outside world. And now there's one that's like been released. He goes outside and he's pretty much blinded because he's never seen the sun before. And now he's like looking around and he sees like a tree and then he sees the shadow of the tree. And because of how he was raised, he believes the shadow is real, not the actual tree, right? Obviously, like as time goes by, his like eyes adjust and he learns that like the shadows aren't the reality, right? And like this is the thing, like this whole allegory, like it expands into like his whole theory of forms, and that's like a very complex topic, so we're not going to go into that. Maybe we will at a later point, you know. But you'll kind of get a gist of what the theory of forms is through this allegory, right? So now he like learns and like he gets to a point where he can see ducks on the water and like see their reflection, you know? Whereas before, while he was in the cave, all he could see was shadows. Now he returns to the cave and he's like telling the two people who are still in the cave about everything he's learned. And he's like trying to free them from their shackles and like take them into the real world. And they resist, right? And not only do they resist, they become very hostile because they think this guy's gone crazy and they're like, oh, like he must not know what he's talking about. He must become blind, you know? And all of these things. So, um, yeah, and like the thing is, this is something similar that happened to Plato's teacher Socrates, right? He was a philosopher, a very famous philosopher who was pretty much executed for teaching people about philosophy and making them question everything, right? To the point where like his students would begin questioning like the government and the society, and like it was just not beneficial for the government and society at that point to be questioned so much, right? To the point where that they threw him in jail, and like it's a whole like crazy story about like him being in jail, but eventually he got executed, right? So yeah, I mean, the allegory of the cave is essentially like a story about that, you could say, you know? And yeah, so this guy tries to free these people from the cave. They choose not to. And I guess that's like pretty much where we can end it. And let's like break this down, right? And like, why is this relevant to life? How does this tie into what we were talking about yesterday with like this whole fable of the donkey and the tiger and the lion, right? So, this is the thing. This person who exited the cave, we can look at him as though he gained knowledge, he gained enlightenment, right? He went out into the real world and he realized that his reality before was not the reality. It was just a shadow, it was an illusion, right? And people are so hung up in playing these shadow games and like falling for the illusion than actually like looking for what's the reality, right? To the point where they will attack you and argue with you and become very hostile because their ignorance is so strong, right? They choose to be ignorant. And not every single person has the capacity to let go of their ignorance, to choose knowledge, to choose wisdom, to choose enlightenment, right? So you have to understand that like you're going to come across these kind of people in your life. However, if you are a true philosopher, it's still your job to go and educate people, right? And try and enlighten people and try and help them learn how to think properly. And I think a lot of the issues we have in the world right now comes down to the fact people don't know how to think. People don't know how to think for themselves. People don't know how to take care of themselves, right? People rely on the government to feed them, to educate them, to literally take care of them, right? And this is literally why we have welfare. It's to keep people from questioning society and like turning against the rich, right? Because if people were all questioning everything, they would start to see the flaws in the system and how the system is designed to keep people down, right? The system wants to keep you dependent on it. And again, it's because the government doesn't care about you, the government doesn't care about me. They only care about expanding their power, gaining more power. And the government never will let go of their power, right? And then when we talk about welfare, it's like, how is this welfare being generated? That's tax dollars, right? And then like we can go into the history of tax, and then that ties into like inflation. And like tax is literally inflation, you know, it's a silent inflation. And then like when you look in the history of inflation, like you can see in ancient like Greece or Rome, where they would file out the centers of the coin and fill it with lead so the weight would be the same, but the actual monetary value was different, right? And then again, like now from there you get into like the morality of money, right? And that's like something Al-Ghazali like really goes into. And Al-Ghazali, for those of you who don't know, he's a Persian philosopher, polymath, like very, very intelligent, wise person, you know? And essentially his whole thought was that if the government doesn't have morality and if they're cheating the business owners or the merchants, what's stopping the merchants from cheating the citizens or their customers, right? And it's all just everything trickles down to the point where now like you have people with a lot of money but without any morals, you know? So, yeah, I mean, I wasn't planning to go on all of these different tangents. Really, my plan was let me just briefly talk about the allegory of the cave and kind of the relevance of it and like relate it back to what we discussed yesterday. But again, when I start talking about something I'm passionate about, I just can go on and on and on, you know? However, I do have to be cognizant of the time. So this is not going to be a very long video again. For those of you who have been watching all of my videos, let me know though, like, do you prefer like 20, 30-minute long videos or do you prefer like the shorter, maybe around 10-minute mark videos, you know? Because I gotta still go to the gym and then I gotta get ready to go out for Beyond Networking. I was planning to get ready before doing this video, so I'd be all like dressed up, you know. But again, like these are not videos for validation or for me to like flex my outfit or whatever, you know. That's why like generally you'll see me wearing like basic shit, and it's always like pretty much the same few outfits, because I've outgrown that part of my life, you know. But it is a formal event, so it's like I can't just show up in sweatpants and a t-shirt, you know. So I do have to dress up a little bit, and like that's why I got this fresh haircut. Shout out to the barber homie. And yeah, so key takeaway of today: if you watch this video, your homework is watch the Truman Show. It's a movie, and then go watch a couple YouTube videos about the allegory of the cave, and then go and learn about the theory of forms, right? And that should set you on a pretty good path, and like you probably have a lot to like digest when you go into this. And again, like these are all topics that like I'll come back to year after year, you know. Sometimes there's a few like year break in the middle, but generally speaking, I'll come back to it year after year. And the funny part is, for me anyways, it always like enters my mind at the same kind of time throughout the year, right? So yeah, anyways, Zoo Crew, that's it for today. Peace out. We will see y'all tomorrow.